Yep, I know what you're thinking. What on earth is a country boy from Norfolk like me doing in such a big, bustling city, looking for forgotten ruins? Well, I've recently visited London on the hunt for some beautiful historic sites. Now, I'm not talking about the famous places that everyone knows about, the Tower of London, Tower Bridge, Natural History Museum, to name a few. Oh no, I'm sniffing out some little hidden gems which, I think, you may not even know about. You may be expecting me to take you to the far reaches of the London boroughs, hours between sites, but no, I promise that all these historical wonders are within walking distance of each other, and are all in the heart of London. Not only that, but you could visit all of these sites in just a single leisurely afternoon. We start today's adventure on Mark Lane. Tucked away between tall, glass business complexes, stand the ornate medieval tower of All Hallows Staining. Staining meaning stone. Notable as most churches would have been of timber construction during this time. This 14th century tower is all that remains of a 12th century church, which may have possibly been built even earlier, making it one of the oldest medieval churches still standing in London. Walking a little south, we stumble upon the ruins of another church named St Dunstan's of the East. Named after a 10th century monk, this church narrowly survived the Great Fire of London in 1666, whereafter it was given a new tower and steeple by Sir Christopher Wren. Then, in 1941, the church was bombed by the Luftwaffe during World War II and remains today as a hollow skeleton. St Dunstan's still continues to shine with beauty, now a stunning example of horticulture, hosting a plethora of local and tropical plants. A quick stop now at Tower Bridge, and an extra little hidden gem of historic London. This unassuming door is actually an entrance to a mortuary where, since as early as medieval times, people would dredge dead bodies from the Thames and store them in this room overnight before being moved on. The tide of the river makes this spot a particularly common area for floating bodies and general debris to end up. Over the bridge and turning right, we arrive at the Grand Cathedral of Southwark. Not exactly hidden, granted, but when people think of a London cathedral, they most certainly think first of St Paul's. Southwark Cathedral is tucked away between giant modern buildings, and keeps its historical treasures of intrigue close to its chest. The first known religious building on these grounds was a small Saxon convent, and has remained a monastic site ever since. However, its roots go even further back some 2,000 years, originally being part of a Roman settlement over the water from Londinium, the first settlement which has now become London. More about Londinium later. In 1106, the church was given an elevated status, becoming an Augustinian priory. Southwark, alongside Westminster and St Bartholomew's, grew to become the three great monastic churches to have survived in London. Here we see a remarkable slice of 2,000 years of history. The red sign showing us the remnants of a Roman road, Norman priory foundations, possibly a 13th century stone coffin, and 18th century brick kilns.
Tend the earth, care for God's good creation, and bring forth the fruits of righteousness. Go in the peace of Christ. Thanks be to God.
A short walk west, and we find the ruinous remains of Winchester Palace. Only this corner of the walls remain, boasting a grand circular window which would have bathed the multi-level medieval hall in sunlight. Founded in the 12th century, this grand palace survived until the 17th century, when it was then divided up into tenements and warehouses. During the medieval period, this building served as the bishop's private retreat and featured tennis courts, bowling alleys, and pleasure gardens. On our way to our next stop, we pass the reconstruction of Shakespeare's famous Globe Theatre, opened to the public in 1997. I've watched a play in this theatre. I highly recommend it. Perhaps I will revisit one day and make a dedicated video and show off this beauty inside. Around this area, there are steps leading down to the riverbanks. A popular hobby amongst treasure hunters is to sift through these muddy banks in search for historic artifacts. Hopping over the river again, and a short distance past St. Paul's Cathedral, lays the ruins of Greyfriars Church. Once a giant monastic building, it was the second religious house to be founded in England by the Franciscan monks, known for wearing grey robes. The church boasted a university which held a giant library, rivalled only to Oxford University. The church stood from 1225 to 1538, where it fell to the dissolution of the monasteries. Our journey ends with our final and oldest site of historical importance today. These are the walls of Roman Londinium. Although heavily amended over the centuries, the fact that these walls have stood the test of time and are still here today is an incredibly rare and fascinating achievement. The walls we see here are part of a Roman fort located in a northwestern part of the city, now known as the Barbican Estate. The name Barbican comes from the Low Latin word barbicana, which referred to a fortified outpost or gateway. This fort was built during the aftermath of Boudicca's Iceni rebellion, which saw Londinium razed to the ground, and were the first section of defensive walls to be built around the town. Later, in around 200 AD, city walls were built to surround the rest of Londinium. This quick reconstruction saw Londinium become the new provincial capital of Roman Britain, replacing the old capital, Camulodunum, which is now Colchester. I have a great video on the history of Colchester, which I will link at the end of this video, along with a playlist of Romano-British history. I highly recommend giving it a watch if you enjoy Roman history. The Roman walls were later adopted by the Normans, who continued to improve the defences of London with the construction of the Grand Castle by the river's edge, now named the Tower of London. This section of Roman walls are most remarkable due to the fact that they have been hidden for centuries. During World War II, this section of London was extensively bombed due to the industrial buildings which were situated here. The destruction of these factories unveiled this segment of Roman wall, which has been modified over the centuries as the walls have been incorporated into other buildings which have now also gone. I hope you enjoyed this tour of historic London, and feel free to subscribe for more history that you may have never known about.